You're listening to the GC Collaborative Podcast, a resource for the worship arts team at Grace Church.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the GC Collaborative Podcast.
Hello, hello.
Yes, it is. This is the month of May.
May 1st.
May 1st, yeah.
Almost May the 4th.
Oh.
Be with you.
That's right. Can't have a podcast episode without a Star Wars reference. I'm looking at my friend across the way, who we have a special guest today. Before we get to our guest, let me just introduce myself. I'm Ben Abusada, and to my left, co-hosting this episode of the podcast, and every episode really, is
Luke Lauber.
Yes.
You usually do a bigger, longer intro, but it's okay.
Not this time.
My birthday's over.
We have
It's
important
fine.
company today.
It's true. We got stuff to get to.
That's right. Man, so we just celebrated Easter.
Easter weekend. It's awesome.
Like, this is, at the time of this recording, we are on at Thursday after Easter, and it felt like, for me, I don't know if you had this, but for like 3 days, I felt like I was in a fog of just trying to get out of that mode, that feeling of being a little fatigued.
Yeah. I slept for 3 days straight.
Really?
Yep.
I
Just
think you're
woke
lying.
up for this podcast. I'm so excited. Set my alarm.
And then you're going on vacation.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
It's all about rhythms, healthy rhythms.
well, let me just say, the majority of our podcast listeners are the people who are a part of our worship ministry at all of our campuses. And let me just say that every campus I got to go to on Easter weekend, and it was just a wonderful experience to see every community worshiping and executing, all of the stuff that the creative team put together, and just being able to see our teams glorify God in unique ways, but yet still similarly, it was amazing, and everybody did so good. I'm just so grateful for all the volunteers that made church happen across our campuses. It was beautiful. It was a wonderful experience. So thank you to
And we
all
had
of you.
like 40 plus baptisms, I think.
We did, yeah.
I don't know the exact number, but it was awesome.
I bet I could find it. I need to actually get that on our social media stuff. But so we had 45 total across our campuses, which is awesome.
I was right, 40 plus.
Yeah, 40 plus. That was a very safe prediction.
Yeah.
I could have said 10 plus. We had 10 plus.
One
it was
plus.
Amazing.
1 plus. At least 1 plus.
Yeah. But it was an
gosh.
amazing weekend, and so thank you all of you that were a part of it, and everything from the online recording capture for our worship that evening was beautiful. You can still catch the online Easter celebration. It's still up there, and it'll be up there. We'll actually leave that whole service up the entire year, so you can go catch it at the Visit Grace Church
And
YouTube
our
channel.
drummers. We got a shout out to our drummers too, who did the video and then invited friends.
Yeah.
And so we originally had like 4 or 5 drummers in mind, and then they just started inviting friends and everything else. So that was really awesome as well. So
It was cool.
pretty awesome.
So today on our episode, we've been doing a thing. When did we start this? Was that last year? I think last fall. We started inviting people who were not necessarily a part of our worship ministry, because our first season of this show, we were talking to people who were in our worship ministry. And this year, what we've been doing is inviting others. I think we had Corey Ryan. We've had other folks. We had the Brothers McClurg. And so we've invited people to who have
Zane.
Zane. People.
Zane
Well,
Callister.
he's not on necessarily. He's a part of our team.
He is
creative.
part of our team. I guess you're right.
I
Sorry,
would
Zane.
disagree with that.
I'm
Zane is-
sorry. Zane, I forgot. I'm sorry.
Zane is a valued member of our team.
He is. Love
He's done
him.
some amazing creative stuff. But we've had a good conversations with people talking about their journey in creativity, their journey in worship, and being a part of worship ministry. And today, I'm excited. This is a very personal excitement for me, because we have Wisdom Moon here with us. And before we get into the questions, people that are like, is that a real name?
Yeah.
Because you deal with that all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Do we sing him his theme song that we made for him that we worked on in the car here?
Go ahead. Let's do it. You start.
It's time for wisdom, wisdom moon. It's time for wisdom, wisdom moon.
Wow. I'll give it like 5.5 out of 10.
Yeah, wow.
Okay, that's
Well,
good.
you know what?
That's
We'll take
actually
that.
pretty good for.
Yeah, I'm actually really happy.
That's better than 50%, because I had no idea what was
Yeah.
going to come out of that mouth.
That was better than most of my grades in school, so I'm really excited. Moving on up.
So I'm going to introduce you, Wisdom. Wisdom is a personal friend of mine. Man, we've known each other since 2008.
Wow.
Yeah. Are you saying wow? Are you saying wow? Okay, because you didn't know that. I thought it was wow. Like I can't believe I stuck around this guy in some way. So it was a cool story because we used to do a podcast very similar to this in ways that it was the All About Worship podcast.
Yeah.
And you and I started doing. You were doing it before we met, and then you were like, "Hey, would you like to kind of partner and do this together?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "Man, that'd be fun." And so we. You invited me to be a part of it, and it was amazing because we interviewed lots of worship artists in like the early 2010s, going into that era, which was kind of a golden time with regard to worship music at that time, and so it was exciting to be a part of. But the coolest thing was just meeting you as a friend and making a new friend, and we had a lot of fun together. Yeah. So anyway, so if you could maybe just as we kind of get started talking to you. Maybe tell people about yourself, a little bit about your history, who you are. Is your name real? Is that a secret identity?
Ooh.
What's your real job?
Yes, my name is real, not Israel. I was born in Korea, South Korea, Seoul, South Korea, and my given name is Wisdom in Korean. It was just translated once I moved here because I was 9 years old. We moved to California, the Bay Area, and nobody knew how to pronounce my name. They would just butcher it.
Yeah.
And the way actually Korean names work, it's not like first name and last name. It's actually a last name, first name, and middle name. But when you call somebody by their name, you actually say their first and middle name together. So there's actually technically no middle name, I guess. So my name in Korean is like two names together in English.
Okay.
So yeah, it didn't really make sense just to like use my Korean name because it was like half of a word basically.
Right.
So yeah, when I was moving up to junior high, I decided to just translate it.
Cool.
Can you say your real name? Is that?
It's pronounced Myung-chul in
Okay.
Korean.
Oh, okay.
I did not. This is new info for me.
Yeah, so it's actually from like my mom's like prayer warrior partners that she had in Korea. She asked them to name me, so they prayed and got it from Proverbs.
No way.
My mom like prayed the Hannah's prayer. She had 4 girls, and they kept trying, for a boy, and then basically said, "God, if you give me a son, I'll dedicate him to ministry." And her friends like named me. She did like a 100-day prayer before, she was praying it with me.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's cool. I did not know that about your name.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a cool fact. So the reason we invited you was you have a great story of building something and following God's direction and leading in the midst of doubt and potential fears and those kinds of things. And so that's why we invited you to be a part of the show, is to be able to just kind of share your story. And one of the things that could you maybe talk about what you do now? What are you currently doing?
So right now, I do a lot of things.
Yeah, you do.
One, I own a Christian marketing agency, and we basically work with businesses, churches, nonprofits.
Marketing with Wisdom, right?
Marketing with Wisdom, yep. And then we also started like a branch of it called Christian Music Marketing because I have a lot of background in Christian music. So we help a lot of artists, churches releasing music. Last year, I launched an independent record label, Christian record label, called Lula Street Records. Also, I guess about 6 months ago, I joined a church in downtown Kansas City as their part-time worship and creative arts director. So, and then I'm also a dad to 4 kids.
Yep. Yes. And husband of a lady.
1. Yeah.
3. Yeah. Dad of many kids, husband of 1. This is good. This is good news.
Heading in the right direction. I like it.
Could have said. What if he would have said something different? Yeah, I've got 3 wives.
Yeah. You would have just said.
Stop.
You would have just said, "Wow, I didn't know that. I never knew that about you. This is new information. This is so cool."
All right. Yeah. So yeah.
Oh man.
No, that's awesome. And Bree, whom I've also known forever as well.
Yeah.
So can you maybe talk about? I mentioned that you and I did the podcast back 2008. We started doing that, and then I think life changed. I got really busy.
Which
and then,
can we just hold for, because that's
Absolutely.
a huge thing. I think you guys are both so humble about this podcast, but it was a big deal. Like when Ben talks to me about it, it's like, one, you guys were way ahead of the curve in a lot of ways, because podcasting wasn't like a thing back then, which was really awesome. And then two, like he would always talk about it every once in a while, like, oh yeah, me and Wisdom used to do a podcast. When I go back and listen to these things, you guys like interviewed like Matt Redman, like Carrie Job, like, you know, I don't know if both those, but people like that. I mean, which is pretty cool and pretty awesome. And they're very powerful podcasts, and just the conversations you had and just talking about music and worship in the church. So it's, if you have time, go back, way back in the archives of,
I think they're still there.
what's it
right?
called?
All About Worship.
All About Worship. And they're awesome podcasts.
Yeah.
And it's really cool too, because it just, podcasting wasn't what it is today, where it's like a lot of people do it and a lot of people listen to it. I think
We
you
used
guys
to actually have to explain what a podcast was.
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah,
I'm
you did. I
sure.
remember that.
I'm sure. So it's actually, you guys did a lot of pioneering, which I think is really, really cool, not only in the Christian world with those conversations, but also technologically with the church world as well, because not a lot of people were doing that kind of stuff. So I always think it's really, really cool what you guys did back then. So I don't want to just guide over that, like, yeah, we had a podcast.
I appreciate that. See, that's good to have the guy over here to help. Yeah,
Yeah, and actually,
Luke's my name.
Yeah.
this guy.
Yes.
Look at.
We actually used to banter a lot on the podcast, and I would always make fun of Ben for his Star Wars stuff. Pretty much every episode.
That's right. It was so bad. One time you did an episode that appeared in a feed, the All About Nothing podcast, where you had me talk about Star Wars for like 15 minutes. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I was like, what is this?
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
All About Nothing.
I love it.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm
We had-
sorry to interrupt you.
So yeah, it was
good question.
Totally fine. Yeah, I remember when we met. We were doing at Grace. We were doing a microcast, is what I was calling it, in the middle of the week. And you were looking for a church home, I think, because you guys just moved in the area, and I think you stumbled onto our podcast, and you heard that I was trying to do something that was different at the time. That a lot of churches weren't doing like a midweek podcast. That actually I couldn't think of any that were doing that now. And now you go, and it's like everybody's doing this kind of thing. But and you stumbled on it, and you were like, well, maybe we could do this. And so we did it. We had breakfast at First Watch, and
Man,
dude,
your memory
it's bizarre.
I'm like, I don't remember.
Yeah, and then we, it was awesome. And then we just kind of launched into talking to, I think, Daryl Evans, and that was one of our first ones. But so you kind of helped pioneer that, and I do think that, to Luke's point, like I think you, in your motivation and your desire to, it wasn't just about putting a show together to entertain people. The heart that you had with that, and that was instilled in what we were doing together, was really the vision of reaching with the worship leader that was just out there on the front lines. We used to say at the end, "Take your church to the throne." You remember that?
Yeah.
And we'd just be trying to encourage the worship leader out there that feels alone, that feels like they don't have a connection to others that are, on the front lines of doing weekly worship ministry. So that was a significant thing, and so that was kind of where you started, right, with the All About Worship podcast. And maybe talk a little bit about that journey, because there were some trials in the midst of that I remember sitting with you after podcasts late at night.
Actually, when I was in California, I was on staff at a church full-time as youth pastor, and I was also really involved in the worship ministry at the church. And we were a church about 1,200 people. Our youth group was like 100, and that's when podcasting was kind of like a really new thing. So about like 16 years ago, and I was gifted an iPod, and I was like, before I was gifted an iPod, I was like, iPods are stupid. I was like, why would anybody want an iPod?
I've got a disc, man.
So
This is going nowhere.
I started checking out.
What a visionary.
I started checking out podcasts, and I was like, wow, this is a whole new world. I never saw anything like it. And at the time, there weren't that many podcasts. And I really was like, it might be cool to do a podcast for worship leaders and just like have conversations with other worship leaders. So I got on MySpace at the time. That was the big platform, and just started connecting with other worship leaders around the world and just having conversations with them. None of those are actually out there anymore because I just took it off. I'm like, these were really bad.
Ban them. Never be found again.
Yeah, and I mean, that was really my heart, was to just, have conversations with people and learn from each other. And I just felt like we could all learn from different perspectives and different denominations and things like that. And so I started it more as a hobby. And as I transitioned from that church to another church and had a lot of life changes, had more kids and stuff. When we actually landed in Kansas City, it was after I left the church in Atlanta, and we didn't think we were going to stay here long term. But we really felt like we were supposed to be here and raise our kids for a while. And so I was like, okay, then I need to figure out how I'm going to feed my family. Because the podcast was not really making any money at the time. So I just actually worked down the street from here in Corporate Woods at a random company and doing random stuff that I just hated. But I still worked hard because, I just grew up, I guess, valuing work ethic. So no matter what I was doing, I felt like I should do my best and try to be the best, in what I was doing. So I started at this company literally scanning documents, health documents for people.
Yeah.
And it was miserable.
Now that company's Cerner.
Because of your scheme. Yeah.
But I literally I've never had a job where I would look down at my watch and then look back down later on thinking, an hour went by. But it was 10 minutes. And just the day felt so long. And I would sit there, do this mindless work. And while I was working, I would dream of things, and I would have, some days I literally have 30 different ideas by the end of the day. And a lot of it had to do with the All About Worship podcast. And at the time, we didn't really have any kind of way to directly contact listeners. So we started developing that, developing an email list. And we literally went from 0 emails to, when I ended up selling All About Worship, it was 26,000 subscribers on the list. Oh, wow. And we had, on the podcast, I think we had 10,000 plus downloads a month. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, we actually had sponsors that started reaching out, record labels reaching out, wanting to do e-blast to the list and things like that. And during that whole time, I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I sustain this, work my day job, and also spend time with my family. Yeah. And most nights I would literally stay up till 2 or 3 a.m. Working, because I wanted to spend time with my kids before they went to bed. And then after they went down, I would work on All About Worship. And then wake up, go to work, do that whole thing all over again, work a lot of Saturdays. And so it was a grueling time. And I've a lot of times said, that those several years were kind of my Egypt in a lot of ways. And I felt very isolated too. I didn't have community, and I wasn't doing something full-time that I was passionate about. Right. And just looking back, having you, somebody that was supportive of what I was doing and believing in what I was doing, that helped me keep going. Because in a lot of days, I was man, I just want to give up. I just want to be forget this. So I think just a lot of the ups and downs, a lot of days where I felt discouraged or disappointed.
Yeah. So what I think a lot of people probably relate to that, the idea of doing things that you don't feel are your calling. For you, what was your motivating factor? Was there something that you would look to or cling to that kind of got you through that time? Whether it was you saw a finish line, or it was man, I don't know, I'm just going to keep plowing, and what was that for you?
Yeah, I feel like it's just probably part of this desire to, honor God in everything I was doing, and part of, I guess, the way I felt like I would honor God is making sure I'm serving my family well, and providing for my family. And so even I had this transition where I was able to start doing more all about worship stuff on more of a full-time level.
Yeah.
But even then, I was doing some like temp work here and there just to like fill the gaps. And, I would do one day here filing paperwork, at some company. I would go over here and do some random stuff. Oh, actually, one time in Corporate Woods, I had this temp job where it was a food like tasting survey or whatever research thing. I was hired to be the food deliverer, like one of the people that goes and gets chicken sandwiches at like all these fast food places. And we had to like literally run because they were in this like meeting room in the building, and we had to run, go get the sandwiches through drive-through, like drive really fast back, and then run the food back to the people before it gets cold.
Wow.
That was like one of my jobs I did.
Man, this is before
For a
Uber.
weekend.
You were Uber before it even existed.
Yeah, I invented
Uber Eats.
Yeah, yet another
delivery.
thing you were a trendsetter on.
Oh, man.
Probably would have made a lot more money on that one.
I remember as you talk about those stories, and we talked when we met to kind of talk about what we're going to discuss today. I remember that story of recording that episode with you, because you were doing like, I don't know, 2 to 3 jobs at one time, and then we would do our recordings like at 10 o'clock at night, right after the kids. Your kids were in bed, my kids were in bed, because it was I was doing the same thing, but I had one specific role. But I would try to use that time in the evening with my kids. But so we'd record our shows like at 10 o'clock at night up at the South OP campus.
Look at us now. We're recording at like 2 in the afternoon.
We made it.
Gonna go to Black Eyed Pea after this, get a nice little Salisbury steak and get to bed early.
We're thinking more Piccadilly Cafe. But
pretty tired. It's 5:30.
There was one night in particular, and I shared this with you when we met for lunch. I was like, afterwards, you were just so down and beaten, and you were like wanting me to take the podcast, and I was like, no way. I'm like, that's not going to happen. Like, if I take it, it's going to die. Like, I'm not going to be able to carry this forward. And the thing that I think you and I both, I just remember as well, we were getting emails from people, right, all over the world. Yeah. And so I remember one from a worship leader in Africa, or a missionary who was leading worship in like Africa, I think, one of the somewhere down there, and he just was thanking us for just talking and being real, like having fun is what I interpret that as, and just people were like, man, I feel like I could know these guys. And then we were invited to do, so you wanted to get rid of it. And I was like, not a chance.
I was exhausted.
You were.
I was like, I don't know if I could keep doing this.
Yeah. And thankfully, for whatever reason, I don't know if we took a break for a few weeks or what, but carried forward with that. But so moving along with the podcast as it began to grow, and we were beginning to get notes from people around the world and how it was encouraging people. And then we would meet people like at the National Worship Leader Conference. People started recognizing us from time to time, and that was cool because you got to meet the people that we were reaching. And when you sit behind a microphone, you have no idea. You're just like, we're just going to put this out in the world and have fun and see what happens. So that was an incredible journey. And then just seeing you at that point, and then just seeing God start to really bless that podcast. And it was not just a podcast. You were doing a website. You were equipping people with other tools through the email distribution and all that stuff. So then you came to a point where you decided to let it go. Was that because somebody approached you and said, hey, I'd like to buy this? Or were you just at a point where you were like, I'm done with this? How did that come up?
I did have somebody approach me one time and offered to buy it. And they didn't really tell me who was kind of like the investor behind it. And I just didn't have peace about that opportunity. And so I turned it down. And obviously All About Worship was like my baby, and it was like I felt like it had to go to the right person.
Yeah.
And so we actually moved to Nashville. I guess it was like 8 years ago now. And part of the reason for moving was to continue like doing All About Worship and, you know, be closer to like the Christian music industry and the people that I would be interviewing and stuff. And I had some social media accounts that I was managing for clients at the time. And so one of them was a label named Centricity Music. If you know, like Lauren Daigle, Unspoken, like that's the label that has those artists. And they were a client of mine because they had asked me to come on board when I was here still to help them launch this like worship imprint at the label that was going to release like just worship music. And at the time I turned it down. I was like, yeah, I think I'm good. You know, I don't really want to pursue that right now, but I'd be happy to like help you guys as a consultant. So when maybe like a year or two later, when Bree and I decided to move to Nashville, I let them know, and they asked me again to come on board. So at that time, I actually joined their staff, and I did have to kind of like talk through, okay, what about All About Worship? And also I had something called Kingdom Songs at the time. That was
that's right. I
Yeah,
forgot about that. I remember that.
retreats, and so I had to talk through that with them to make sure it wasn't a conflict of interest. And, you know, I wanted to like do things right and not like, you know, hide things from them. So, and that was All About Worship was part of the reason that they saw value in like, you know, bring me on to their team. But they said, yeah, you're okay to keep it, you know, going as long as it doesn't like conflict with what you're doing here. And then after that, I went to work at Integrity Music, which is another label, and mainly they release worship stuff, and they didn't require me to release All About Worship either to somebody, but I just felt like at that season that I wanted to focus on like that one thing I was doing and really like make sure our artists were served well, and I had taken over overseeing this resource platform called We Are Worship, which is kind of similar to All About Worship.
Yep,
and
I remember it.
Yeah, and I
think you had me on a show one time or an episode. Or
okay. See, I don't remember.
We did a live stream. I was on a panel.
Maybe we didn't release it. No.
Probably not. I mean, yeah. I think I talked about Star Wars. But no, it was like
it was censored.
It was like 4 or 5 other people or something.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, we did like a round table thing.
Round tables in the middle of the day or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
So because of a lot of the things being similar, I was like, you know, I think I need to just focus on what I'm doing at Integrity Music. So. I had several conversations with people, and I ended up selling it to a friend of mine.
Yeah,
so,
and one of the things too that I like hearing you recount that. One of the things I always noted was the and I'm using air quotes, the Christian music scene and industry. While it's labeled with a phrase that identifies itself with Christ, it's not always. Done with the utmost integrity. And you have always been something that, or, someone who has managed well with integrity through all of that stuff, like all the way from back in 2008, all the way to now. But during that time, I remember the tensions, because I think you would come into town and we'd go have dinner or something. And I remember one time you were just kind of processing some of the stuff that you were dealing with. And there was some rough things and decisions. And then you finally felt called to come back, right? At some point. Talk about that. Like, what led you to that point?
Yeah, and I would say just because it's the Christian music industry, it doesn't mean it's full of Christians even, or people that are really like looking at it as a ministry. And it is a business, it is an industry. I get that people have to make money, support their families, obviously. But yeah, I think there was a tension for me working in the industry, even though like I'm still, and I'm probably way more connected than I was like 5 years ago in the industry. And but I think just processing through, at least for me, I have my values and convictions, and the way I can hopefully influence people is through how I live, and what what I say and do, in meetings, and how I, follow through on things. So I was never like preachy, or telling people what to do with the way they were doing business or their lifestyle, but I wanted to like exemplify it, through how I did things differently. Yeah. And a lot of times, actually, at Integrity Music, I really thought maybe, okay, they're probably going to fire me for saying this, in this meeting. But yeah, it was really cool because they did value me, and sometimes like sharing a different perspective on things. And I kept getting promoted and getting more leadership responsibilities. Yeah. And
you're saying that the more you would challenge things or ask questions that were challenging, they seemed to like that, or at least go, oh, he's asking good questions.
Yeah, I think they valued it because it was a different perspective. And I always did it in a respectful way too. And I think for anybody listening that maybe works in the marketplace or in ministry or whatever, I think there are seasons where we are called to speak up and challenge the status quo, or like share a different perspective. And like part of my reason for working in the industry, like working at labels, because I felt like God was calling me to be a voice in it. And I'm like, well, if I don't speak up, I'm not being a voice. So God kind of gave me this boldness to not care, what happens to me. So I was able to, speak up and like really help steer some things differently. And I think with any industry, but with Christian music mainly being in Nashville, really it could turn into a bubble where, you don't really know what's going on outside of Nashville, and I think some of the decisions, that I saw being made in the industry, and like people, the way that they would maybe perceive the church in America or globally, I saw it differently because of my experiences and not being a part of this industry, and coming from the outside. Like I never went to school for music business or anything like that, and I didn't even know how to get into the industry. I just like got invited in, and I learned the ropes. I had to learn everything about it. But I think being somebody from the outside actually helped bring value in a different way, to where I was at. So, but what was your original question? I feel like maybe I didn't answer it.
You are answering it. It was the transition from coming from there too.
Oh, yeah,
and I made note of how you something I've always loved about you is how you did things with like integrity, and then you kind of launched a little bit into reasons, I think, why you left where you were at. And I think the integrity question kind of sparked some of the conversation, or some of the things you were saying, which was some tensions and that kind of thing, which obviously you don't have to go into details with, but
I mean, I've had different people tell me I had an entrepreneurial spirit.
Oh, absolutely.
And I didn't really own that for a long time. I was like, no, I don't think so. Like, nobody in my family owns a business, and it just sounded scary too. So even like working at labels, they would always tell me, that was like something they valued about me, but I didn't really see it in myself. And I guess my last few months at Integrity Music, things were totally fine. Like I didn't have any like issues or anything like that. I loved the people I was working with, and the vision, and like the purpose behind what we were doing. And we were a nonprofit ministry. But I kind of got to this point where Bree and I both felt like we were being called to like step out and start this marketing agency. And one of the reasons is because just being a part of so many meetings with artists that were signing to labels, and when somebody signs to a label, typically they're giving up ownership, either full or partial ownership to their songs, which the songs are like the most valuable thing that an artist has. And they're also giving up creative control. And a lot of the reasons that I kept hearing over and over why they were doing that is because they were so desperate for a team, and especially like a team that would handle their marketing And I looked around and I was like, well, there's nobody providing this for independent artists. And so we were like, okay, let's take a huge step of faith and do this. And so we moved back to Kansas City. I didn't have any investor or anything like that. And it was literally me. I think I paid maybe like $25 for my logo.
Yeah.
I haven't told anybody this, so this is exclusive.
Well, with a name like Wisdom, I mean, come on, you don't
even need a logo?
Yeah,
Your brand.
you are branding yourself.
And I built the website like overnight, and on social media, I just like announced it, and I was like, "Hey, this is what I'm doing now."
I remember I remember getting a follow on like some of my social media. I'm like,
oh yeah,
and I look
Spam.
like, wait a minute, this is Wisdom.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I didn't know what to expect. Like I literally went from a full-time job with the salary, benefits, overnight to nothing, like having none of that. And we did it because we really prayed and we sought counsel. Some crazy stuff happened even with our house in Nashville because we had just built a house 2 years prior. And they were still building homes like around us, and we were like, okay, if we're gonna move back to Kansas City, we have to sell this house. And we didn't know how that was gonna happen, and that's a whole long story. And like it literally happened like overnight. Somebody bought it without even coming and seeing the house.
Man.
It was crazy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So there were like a lot of signs, where we were like, okay, we really feel like this is God, directing us. So. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that like God basically said, okay, here you go. You're going to do this and I'm going to bless it. I'm going to send people your way. Like I didn't have to do digital advertising. I didn't have money to do advertising. It was so much like just word of mouth.
I think people were sharing it. I saw people.
Yeah.
And that's the thing though. You had built such a great reputation with artists and other people. Like, that's the integrity thing. And that I think that a lot of the fruit came from that. It was awesome.
So I have a question for you because I think it's really interesting. So you had that season back when you were here before you moved to Nashville. And I think one thing I'd love to hear is, so looking back at that, there are a lot of people in that season right now in life where it's like, I'm doing something I don't like or maybe something I don't feel like God's called me to, but I'm in this season and I just feel like I'm supposed to be working at a record label. I'm supposed to be singing and, being an artist or having a career or something, but they're making copies, or something like that. So what would you say, like looking back would be like your advice for somebody in that situation right now, where it's like, you look back at that and there was grinding that you had to do, but at the same time, I loved what you said. My priority was to provide for my family, and I felt like that was honoring God as well, which is amazing and I believe totally true. But for the people who are in that situation, like what would you tell yourself back then? Back in 2000.
Oh, when he moved, 2014, right?
Wow. Okay.
Isn't it 2014? Sure. I think it was 2014.
I just always look at him for dates.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how you retain all this.
I remember because we had Joe's KC with the worship guys here in Kansas City. There were some folks that we were kind of developed some friendships and relationships with, and we had a sending away lunch for you. Anyway, go ahead.
But anyways,
all of my memories revolve around lunch.
What was the thing? Because I mean, there, like you were saying, there's days where you're like, I'm just done. I'm going to give up. But something kept spurring you on and stuff like that. And so, and I'm sure there were days where there was no hope. You didn't know, I'm going to go work for Integrity someday. I'm going to go start my own business someday. Like I'm sure that might have been dreams, but at the point there was no, that's happening. So for somebody who's in that spot maybe right now, what would you just encourage, or what were something you learned from that season? Or
I mean, I guess the way that I, especially looking back, the way that I would approach it is, okay, I'm going to be faithful with what I have in my hands, with what God's given me. And, the verse, like, be faithful with the little. And I think he does eventually give you more responsibilities, more leadership, influence. I think nowadays, especially, it's harder and harder to have that mindset because everybody else and everything is telling us, no, you can be an overnight success. You know,
Yeah.
you don't have to wait around. You know, like you can go get what you want. You know, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of career gurus or whatever, like influencers, kind of portraying that lifestyle of like, hey, you can have all of this overnight, but I don't think that's biblical. You know,
Yeah,
I don't think that's
absolutely.
like kingdom. I think that's more of a worldly approach. I think wherever God's put you now, if you're faithful with it and you're doing your best, that's worship. Because one of my favorite verses actually is revolved around food too. I think it's
Nom nom.
1 Corinthians 10:31. It says, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And yeah, you could literally eat for the glory of God. You could work for the glory of God, and I could scan papers for the glory of God.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing it to get to something. I was doing it because like that was my worship at the time to God, and even now it's not all peachy. There's days I'm like, this is really hard.
Oh, absolutely.
This really sucks. We'll
bleep that out later, but continue.
Oh, okay, sorry. They're like 5-year-olds listening.
Yeah. Listen, our audience is like 3 to 8.
I'm so sorry. I'm just kidding. I'm totally joking. No, that's awesome. Because I do think, to your point, like especially with social media and everything, like it is something that a lot of people struggle with. It seems like artists struggle with it a lot too, of just like, oh, well, I'm not doing like my calling, or I'm not doing something important enough that, I'm not, I'm not the Moses or the Jacob of the story. It's I'm just a copy person, which I think is, to what you're saying, is super important in just worshiping the Lord. It's the Brother Lawrence, washing dishes and being in the presence of the Lord stuff. So I think that's huge.
And I think, a lot of times when we have this desire to start our own thing, a lot of times we don't have the patience to serve somebody else's dream and vision, and I think that's super important. To have that season of like serving somebody else's vision, because it really humbles you. Like when you're doing the grunt work for somebody else and you don't even have a passion for what they're doing, and then to be able to launch your own thing at the right time, but I don't think you can get there without sometimes like going through that season of just feeling like, okay, I don't know if I'll ever get to see that happen in my life, But just being able to submit to authority and be able to like serve somebody else's vision, and you learn so much from it too.
That's a good word.
That's really good.
So can you tell people where, as we're wrapping up, because we're getting to the end of our time.
I got one
You
more
got
question.
Go ahead.
One more
please.
question.
Please.
Just because I think it's really cool that you guys did this. So when you left integrity and all of that, the business, not the attribute.
He left his integrity. He left his integrity in Nashville.
That's a big move too. And as a family and your wife, and you have 4 kids, right? And so
They eat a lot.
Yeah, so that's a crazy decision. And so I think it'd be cool, like, I'm trying to think how to phrase this, because I do know people who they want to do something like that, but maybe they just do the decision and make the family just needs to follow. Like, how did you go about that with your wife, with your family?
That's a great question.
Because it is a crazy decision from the outside, like you were saying, but you also felt the Lord calling you to do that. But how did you even know? Like, what were the feelings and the thoughts behind that when you were kind of going through?
How did you invite your wife into that process?
It was actually another food story.
Of course. Chipotle. Please say it was Chipotle.
Actually, what was happening at that time was like I was just head down at integrity. It was funny. I had like used this app in Slack to tell me like how many meetings I had per week or whatever, and it was like 35 hours a week was meetings, or 40 hours a week or whatever. And like I was just like living in meetings, death by meetings.
Life draining. Yep.
And I was in a lot of meetings where we were talking about vision, strategy, where we're headed, and there were a lot of changes happening at the time. That was like really on the outside, like it was all exciting stuff, and they were pouring more focus and resources into the things that I was actually in charge of and stuff. But I would walk away from these meetings and just not feel excited, and I didn't know why. And I just kept trying to figure it out, like, why do I not feel excited? Everybody seems to have buy-in on it. And actually, everybody thought like I would be the most excited because, I was like the church, worship leader guy that joined their team. And one day it kind of clicked in my mind. I was like trying to process it, and like I've been praying about it. And so Bree and I went out to lunch one Saturday for a lunch date, and we were eating barbecue, I think.
That was it.
There it
That
is.
was it.
Yeah.
Best decisions come around barbecue.
Yeah.
And
Where do they have good barbecue at? Kansas City.
That's funny.
Yeah, we felt really led. So I was telling her, man, I feel like the reason I don't feel excited is because I actually don't see myself in the future, like in the vision of all the things that we're discussing. Like, I actually can't visualize myself in it. And so Bree actually brought up the idea of like, what if we sell our house, move back to Kansas City, and start your own marketing agency? And like, she's not the risk taker. I am, in our relationship.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, I actually said, that sounds really scary.
Wow. Role reversal.
Yeah, I was like, wow, this is crazy. And actually, before even moving to Nashville, like for about 2 years, I felt like we were supposed to move to Nashville, but she felt like we were supposed to stay. And so I didn't really push on it. I just was like, if it's God, like he's going to find the right timing where we both align on it. And with this, it was like that day, we both were like, it's scary, but really exciting to think about that.
Yeah.
And so we were like, okay, well, let's start praying about it. And let's, like, as our fleece, just contact our realtor and see if we could even sell our house, And so we kind of took small steps to basically confirm, okay, we have this idea. We feel, peace about it. We feel like maybe this is the next season. But we started to like really ask God to confirm in little ways. Yeah. And so one way was like, we have to be able to sell our house. And the realtor even said, yeah, the market's kind of like even now. You may not be able to get what you're asking for, but we'll see in a couple of weeks if you need to drop your price. So that week, he sends a photographer, takes photos, and then lists it that Saturday. An hour later, we get a text saying, like, you got an offer.
Oh, wow.
Amazing.
Our open house is
so
tomorrow.
cool.
So that was like a big thing. And I think even we've had, some rough times after moving, some hard seasons, and like personally or business wise. And we always go back to, here are the milestones, where we saw God really confirm this is what we were supposed to do, And when we had doubts of like, why did we move back to Kansas City? Or, was this the right thing? Yeah. We always go back to, okay, he's faithful in his word, and he did these things. There's no way to deny that this was not, this is not God, Oh,
absolutely.
So I think that really, for us, those were the like foundational things that really help us when we feel discouraged or have doubts still. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I like that because sometimes it can, even outside looking in, it's like seems like such a big step. But I like that you said it was like kind of the small things leading up, like the selling of the house, like little things like that where God confirmed, just a step at a time. And because I think looking from the outside is like, wow, somebody did a huge thing, but it's like, well, no, God confirmed little things along the way that you didn't see. So that's really, really
it's
cool.
It's like you have that moment, you turn around, you look, you're like, man, this journey I just don't know if this is right. God's with us. You turn around, you look, and there's this pile of rocks that are each moment piled on top. You're like, okay,
Ebenezer.
Exactly. That's where I was going.
No, you weren't.
That's where the Ebenezer, that word that I was. People every time we sing that song, people are like, "What's an Ebenezer?"
Yeah, it's a sneeze.
Scrooge.
It's a high class sneeze. That's what I say.
Yeah.
Ebenezer.
Ebenezer. Man, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing your story. I have one final question. You're a worship leader as well, and this is a question that I think is extremely important, which when I'm phrasing it this way, it's not going to be, but it is. What's your most embarrassing moment leading worship?
Oh gosh.
It's a question we used to ask all of our
Yes.
guests. You remember?
Oh.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, this has happened maybe like, I don't know, 3-4 months ago.
Ooh.
Oh,
I mean,
recent.
I've only been there like 6 months,
Yeah.
so
Recent
it was
juiciness, I like
pretty
it.
embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
We live stream just our third service.
Okay.
We have 3 services, and it stays on YouTube like indefinitely. Unfortunately, this happened during the third service.
Oh no.
Yes.
So we can go back and see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Do we need to stop the podcast so you can tell the story?
So after the singing time, I'm putting my guitar, taking my guitar off, putting it on the guitar stand like it's mounted on the wall, and the pastor comes up to, start speaking. And so I'm hanging up my guitar. I have a microphone stand like right next to me. That was my microphone stand. And I think it was the stand. Didn't have like a very strong like bottom, And I think I had like thought of, okay, we probably should get a better stand because this thing just like,
Skipped a few leg days. Go ahead.
Yeah. 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 So I had not bought a stand. So I accidentally hit the mic stand. I think this is what happened. I mean, it happened so fast, I hit the mic stand. It starts tilting over. And like where it's headed is like where another wireless mic is on the stand and the keyboard is. So I see it falling, right? Like I'm putting my
Slow
guitar
motion.
up. Yeah. And I see at the corner of my eye this happening. So I like immediately turn and try to grab it. I miss it by like an inch. And it falls. And it hits the other microphone. That microphone flies
Oh my goodness.
to the floor. And like we have concrete floors.
Oh no.
So you hear this bam.
Oh no.
And the pastor didn't see what happened, but he happened to be saying like, "Oh, it's a beautiful like fall day." He hears this happening.
Fall?
Yeah, he's like, right with the
Oh my gosh.
and,
Wow.
Yeah, I was so embarrassed because I was like still pretty new and the fact that it got recorded and it's still there.
You submitted to worship fails yet?
Yeah, I think I did send it to That's funny. The
That's
tech
awesome.
team in the back, they were live streaming, and they literally like texted me the video of it right after it happened.
That's awesome.
And-
As any good tech team would. That's
And
just-
then I look, and the screen part of the mic is bent.
Yeah, totally
and,
dented.
Yeah, it was dented. I did have another one like right after that. I feel like 2 weeks later or something where I was walking off the stage and I bump into the keyboard because somebody had moved the keyboard over.
Oh no.
There's like a little bit of space between the keyboard and the like monitor where I always walk up and down. And some event happened like the day before, so they just didn't put it in the right position.
Right.
Yeah. So I bump into the keyboard. Our keyboard player had her iPad on the keyboard. Like it wasn't on the stand. So the iPad slides down, and this is like prayer time or something. It slides down,
no.
falls to the floor.
Did it shatter?
The iPad falls off of her case because
no.
the case was broken already.
Oh my goodness.
And
Wow.
I was like, man, that hurts.
Dang it.
They're just going to start getting a guide up there for you when you leave the stage. Like,
Somebody help
wisdom.
Wisdom. We need a
Come here,
whole new-
wisdom.
Yeah.
Wisdom.
There's a whole new ministry, just a volunteer.
Guiding Wisdom.
Guiding Wisdom. Would you like to join the Guiding Wisdom ministry? Oh my gosh.
That's
Wow.
amazing. I
Man,
love
that's
it.
awesome. Man, I sure appreciate you taking time to
Yeah, man.
come talk to us. And like I said, it's been awesome to see your journey and continuing to see your journey and what you're doing. So can you tell people where they can find you, share your website, the things that people might be interested in looking up your stuff? That'd be fantastic.
Thanks for having me here.
Of course.
I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. It's fun to just even reflect back on like what all God has done. My website is guidingwisdom.com.
There's probably a real website.
My personal website is wisdommoon.com. Our agency is marketingwithwisdom.com and christianmusicmarketing.com. And then our label is lulastreetrecords.com with LULA. So if you're on Instagram, I'm probably the most active on Instagram out of everything else. So you can just find me on Wisdom Moon, or just look on Ben's Instagram and find me in his favorites.
Yeah, that's right.
What's it take to get up there? What's it take? I want
do
to
they
know.
have favorites? I don't know.
They just released that,
Oh, I
actually.
probably
But
need to
it's
do an
not
update.
something like public anybody could see. It's like a private feature.
Okay.
Really? Gosh, just learned something from a guy.
I know. I need to get on there and probably do an update. But
Man.
well, thanks again, man.
Yeah, thank you.
We'd love to have you back sometime.
Heck
and,
yeah.
talk
Love
some
to.
more. That'd be great.
Yeah.
This is the May episode.
This is
so
our last one.
Oh, is
We
this it
take
for
summer
the-
off. Yeah, we always take a summer
All
off.
right. Well, what types of things do we need to tell people before?
Happy Mother's Day, Happy Father's Day,
Right.
Happy Memorial Day,
Wow.
Happy 4th of July,
Independence Day? Oh, the same thing.
Just kidding.
Anybody that's got a birthday?
No, but it's been a great year. We've
It
had
has.
a great year.
It's
We've
been
had a
good.
really great year.
You've had to carry the load a few times because I've missed a few. But
No,
you've done
it was
fantastic
light. It was
job.
light as ever, light as a feather.
Okay. Well,
But no, it's been a great year. A lot of great conversations, and so we're excited for next year.
Yeah.
Mainly because we don't know anything about what's going to happen. So, well,
That's right.
I feel like I'm
it's
excited
going to
about
be
it.
exciting. If you have any
No.
ideas, let us know.
send them,
You
please send them our way.
send
We're running
Luke
out now.
and Luke and or Ben.
Yeah, but no, it's been a great year. I think it's been awesome. Even ministry wise, it's been awesome.
Yeah.
Easter, Christmas, all the weekends. It's just been it's just been awesome.
Where do you lead worship? What church?
It's called New Life City Church.
New Life City Church. Okay. So if people want to check
Yeah.
out that as well, that'd be great.
And what service did that happen on? What was
Third
the date?
service.
What was the date?
Sounds like the fall.
April 2023.
No, it was the fall. It was the fall.
Oh my
It'd
god!
start in October, maybe.
That's hilarious. But no, we just had a great time. So we're super excited.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much for listening, and be sure to share this with your people. And if you've got any questions, let us know. Or if you have any ideas of people we should talk to, we'd love to hear that as well. And don't forget,
As always, Planning Center is a great tool if you accept or decline. If you don't, it becomes like that screwdriver in your screwdriver box that just doesn't really fit anything. So acceptance. I don't know.
I don't know that analogy, but I was just going to let you go down that
I was
path.
like, well, here's the thing. I went down the tool path and I realized I don't own a toolbox, so I don't even know what I'm talking about. So,
We're musicians,
yeah.
artists.
I was like, no, mayday. turn around.
I couldn't even rescue you. I'm like trying to
I know.
rescue you. And
Yeah,
don't know.
I appreciate
How about this? In honor of Wisdom being here and a call back to All About Worship, don't forget this weekend, take your church to the throne. See ya.
Wisdom, wisdom, moon, wisdom, wisdom, moon, wisdom, wisdom, moon.
Thanks for listening to the GC Collaborative Podcast. If you have any questions or would like more information, check us out at visitgracechurch.com.